If I had a nickel for every hero that lost the left hand and right eye before embarking on a vengeful quest, I'd only have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right? And no, I'm not covering Berserk. I'm talking about a book series way older than that. From 1971 to be exact. He was the last of the Vadhagh, the man who dared to kill the gods. He's Prince Corum Jhaelen Irsei. Corum is the main protagonist of the Swords trilogy and the Chronicles of Corum, both written by Michael Moorcock. I already made a joke about that name once, and it would be childish to do it again. But the temptation is there. These books, like many of Moorcock's works, are old, but in my personal opinion, fantasy gets better as it ages. These books were written at a time where the rules of the genre were less well-defined. Because of this, they're unabashedly weird and take risks. They don't feel like someone's novelized D&D campaign or the Lord of the Rings wannabe. And at the center of these books is Corum himself. He is the last of his race, maimed and disfigured, forced to be a pawn for gods and other strange beings. He is a tragic figure in many ways, and navigating his melancholy, as well as shouldering cosmic burdens, makes him a compelling character, even without his sorceress abilities. Before we dive into how Corum came to be, we need to discuss the setting. Each setting of Moorcock's books is but one in a vast multiverse. Now, I know what you're thinking. Multiverses have been kind of done to death, especially in the modern superhero genre, or really every genre at this point. I mean, Angry Birds has a multiverse. But for Moorcock, this wasn't a cheap excuse to bring back alternate versions of characters. Each world has its unique setting, with only tangential similarities to other worlds. One major similarity is the idea of the Eternal Champion. If you've seen my explanation of Elric of Melniboné, you'll know what I'm talking about. Each protagonist of Moorcock's works is an incarnation of the same being, though they themselves are unaware of this. And Corum's world is actually 15. These 15 different universes move together, so they essentially act as one, but more on that later. The 15 planes have long been home to 2 ancient races, the Vadhagh and the Nahdreh. The Vadhagh are pretty much elves. They have slender, good-looking faces, tapering ears, and long, fair hair. You know, the standard elf stuff. What makes them peculiar is that they have pink, gold-flecked skin and eyes that are completely purple, save for their yellow irises. By the time the books take place, the Vadhagh are a waning race. They spend their long lives chilling in their castles, not venturing into the outside world. The Nahdreh, on the other hand, are Wookiee bugbear-looking things, less elegant than their Vadhagh counterparts. By the time of the first book, The Night of the Swords, begins, there's a new race that has spread across the world. They are called the Mabden. Mabden are just humans. Calling them humans would make too much sense, apparently. These Mabden breed and multiply far faster than the elder races, and their barbaric civilization sweeps across the land. It is a time of change. The old order of Nahdreh and Vadhagh come to an end as the Mabden kill these races. And here is where Corum himself comes in. Having spent his entire life chilling in Castle Erorn, Corum, as well as the other handful of surviving Vadhagh, have very little combat experience. So when the Mabden tribes of the dog and the bear roll up to his crib, they seriously mess him up. The leader of these tribes, Glandith Acre, is a sadistic barbarian, and killing the last surviving Vadhagh would be too simple. Instead, he first gouges out his eye. Then, he lops off Corum's left hand. But don't worry, since it was his left hand, Corum emerges all right. Bad jokes aside, Corum does escape, but with one less eye in hand. You see, the Vadhagh have the ability to shift between 5 of the 15 planes of their world. Just like their race, this power has waned with time and is unreliable, but in a pinch, Corum was able to appear invisible to the Mabden and avoid execution. Alive and seeking vengeance, sword and sorcery shenanigans ensue, and Corum ends up meeting Prince Shul, a powerful sorcerer who claims to have turned himself into a god. Now, luckily for Corum, Shul has collected quite a few magic items, 2 of which being the Hand of Quill and the Eye of Rin. And even luckier for Corum, these serve as the perfect replacements for his missing parts. Well, sort of. The Hand of Quill and Eye of Rin actually belonged to weird alien entities, lost gods. So Corum is left looking like something of a freak. His new hand sports 6 fingers and a strange, dark jeweled hide. The eye also looks like a carved gemstone, but its multiple faces make it look like a bug's eye rather than a Vadhagh's. These artifacts are more than just replacements. They each possess sorceress powers. The Eye of Rin, when not covered with a special eye patch, allows Corum to look beyond the 15 planes into the land of the dead. The Hand of Quill allows him to call forth the dead to fight for him. There's a caveat, however. Corum is no necromancer summoner build. The dead he brings forth only fight to escape their entrapment in limbo. Those they kill serve as their replacements. For example, let's say the Jonas Brothers died and are trapped in Corum's limbo-like pocket dimension. If Corum wanted to fight One Direction, he'd call forth the Jonas Brothers. Since they found adequate sacrifices, the Jonas Brothers would finally be freed, and One Direction would take their place in the pocket dimension upon being killed by the Jonas Brothers. Weird analogy, I know. This power is actually quite brilliant from a narrative perspective. Corum can't waste it on level 1 goober enemies, because then he'd be forced to use them in the next fight. There's also the moral question about trapping people's souls, which Moorcock explores quite well. Instead of going on a power trip, Corum is disgusted by his alien body parts and the evil sorcery they are capable of. Yet he is forced to use these powers, as it is the only chance he has at saving the world he knows. Also, quick side tangent, D&D players may see a similarity between Corum's new body parts and the hand and eye of Vecna. I can't cite my source, as to say Vecna's artifacts were inspired by the Corum books, but there are plenty of other Moorcock influence in D&D that make this whole thing seem quite plausible. So, should you take the time to read the Corum books? Short answer, yes. In addition to being a wild sword and sorcery tale that spans entire dimensions, the central character is also compelling. He falls in love with a Mabden woman, one of the race that killed his own people. He is met with the task of saving a world that he no longer recognizes. Corum is also a puppet of gods, often a pawn in a game played by beings Corum shares no love for. Start with the Swords trilogy, and if you really like that, read its sequel series, The Chronicles of Corum. Both have their share of crazy 1970s fantasy weirdness, but also are centered on a conflicted hero. And you know what goes great with psychedelic-inspired fantasy? Not actual psychedelics, drugs are cringe. I'm talking about Dungeon Synth. Whenever I'm at a party and start talking about Dungeon Synth, the women instantly scatter. This music genre is pretty niche, but that niche lines up perfectly with mildew-smelling, yellow-paged fantasy novels. Crank up a Jim Kirkwood or Midnight Odyssey album, and it'll put you right in the headspace for reading Corum books. I might do an in-depth review of these books, but genuinely, I want you to try them for yourself before you let my opinion sway you. If you like old-fashioned sword and sorcery with a little extra razzle-dazzle, check out the Wizard Slayer saga. We got a barbaric hero, cyborgs, fast-paced action, the whole 9 yards, baby. One reviewer even said that it has very strong, classic heavy metal vibes. And if you like free stuff, or your reading list is already super long, there's a link to download a short story featuring the Wizard Slayer character in the description below. I hope you found this video informative, or at the very least, entertaining. You know the drill, subscribe, hit that bell, bully me in the comments if I got anything wrong, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Take care.
Away with you, vile beggar!